End of financial year planning, how to avoid the last-minute tax rush. Join the bucket list accountant himself, David Patterson, as we discuss transforming the end of financial year from chaos to calm through proper planning. Learn why making business decisions based solely on tax benefits can be a mistake. Discover the importance of year-round financial planning and gain strategies for creating a proactive relationship with your accountant. This episode provides practical steps to eliminate the stress of last-minute financial decisions. I'm your co-host, Anthony Perl. Let's get into making your bucket list happen. So, David, end of financial year, we're talking about this, and we've passed the end of the financial year, but there's a good reason why we're going to talk about this, because I know you and I spoke around June, July, a couple of times, and it was just crazy busy for you. But it's crazy busy for you because people have not planned properly. And so end of financial year shouldn't be a mad panic. It should be about planning for it well in advance.
Absolutely. I guess the pressure on end of financial year is there's a specific date and a specific deadline. And if you don't make decisions before that, you miss any opportunities. But the chaos that has in the past that has been June and probably half of May is just hectic, and you're right. People are leaving it to the last 6 weeks of the year to make some decisions about end of financial year and how they can minimize their tax. But absolutely, better planning throughout the whole financial year will certainly help make it a more streamlined process and a less stressful process, especially for us accountants at the fairly full-on hectic 6 weeks where you're going sort of hell for leather. So, yes, I think there's a much better way that it can be done.
I think part of the problem is for many small business owners as well as individually is that there's a feeling of dread because no one wants to pay tax, no one wants to give away money. And so there's this obstacle in the way mentally about it, and the people just put it off and put it off and put it off. But it's changing your mindset around all of that so it isn't a negative experience that is critical, isn't it?
100% is critical. And I think there's two elements to the end of the financial year planning. One is to, do whatever it is that you can do to minimize tax, but it's also about making good business decisions that'll be the beneficial for your business in the long term. So focusing on minimizing your tax with a decision that's not good for the business, I don't think is a good outcome. So the spending money for the sake of spending money to save tax, I'm not a big fan of. But spending money that's beneficial to the business and helps you save tax, much better outcome overall.
Let's talk a little bit about the whole end of financial year in the sense of what is it that people need to be ready for? I mean, stating the obvious, but what are the key things that people need to plan for?
I think probably the key things, and it's the timing of some of these things, is having a really good understanding of what your business cash flow is like. A lot of the time, tax planning options in the last 5 or 6 weeks revolve around spending money. So it's about whether you're buying your equipment, less so now with the change in the immediate write-off, but if it's buying equipment or if it's prepaying expenses or if it's incurring a new expense, it all has an impact on your cash flow. So if you're doing some short-term planning over a 4 or 5, 6 week period, a lot of the decisions that you want to make will get hampered because your cash flow is compromised by the additional spend that you're doing in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and I think planning is so important, as you say, and it's something that has to happen at regular intervals during the year, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're working with clients is to try and get them to focus less on tax and focus more on the growth of their business. So it's about having a forecast or a plan for what your next 12 months is going to look like, what decisions you can be making during that 12 months to improve the outcome and the performance of your business. And then underlying that, part of my role is to make sure that that business is then minimizing the amount of tax that they're paying through certain ways of structuring the overall decision-making of the business. So the more we can get clients to focus on good, solid business decisions and leaving sort of the tax minimization to the accountant, I think the better off people will be in the long run. And no, just to go back to a thing that you said before, Anthony, no one enjoys paying tax. It's a much hated outlay. But at the end of the day, the more profits you're making, the more money you're making, the more tax you'll pay. But part of the overall business overview is to look at, is your structure right? And are there certain timings that we can do to help minimise tax?
Yeah, I think the key here, isn't it, is about the view that you take on things in the planning and having that close relationship to look at those things, and particularly when it comes down to business decisions along the way, so that the consequences are understood, because often you make decisions in business and you may not be at an arm's length enough to make the right decision.
That's right. So if you're leaving your end of year tax planning to the last few weeks, you're more inclined probably to make a knee-jerk reaction to a spend rather than having a much better sort of planning over a whole 12-month period rather than just a 5 or 6 week period at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the key, I guess, mistakes that you see businesses making in terms of things that they've invested in and decisions that they've made along the way that you go, yeah, that was a bit of an oops? And the oops can be both ways, right? It can be you've overspent, and it can also be that you've underspent.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the biggest mistake people make that I see, and others may disagree with this, but the sake of spending for the sake of getting the tax deduction, that becomes the end of year knee-jerk reaction to spend money just to get the tax deduction without looking at the bigger picture of, will me spend this money have an overall beneficial impact on my business? And certain people are worse at this than others, but the decision around tax deductibility rather than business performance, I think, is the biggest mistake that most people make. And that's not to say minimising tax is not important. It is important. I mean, you just got to go back to Kerry Packer and that famous video that he's got about the whole thing. But ultimately, it's about business performance. So if your business is performing well and it's strong, the tax will be what it'll be. But yeah, I think that's the biggest mistake I see, is that they're making a decision based on the tax they're saving, not the outcome for the business.
What's really interesting about that as well is that I know, having worked personally in a lot of the not-for-profit sector in the past, that you see a lot of appeals that happen towards the end of the financial year. Don't forget to give to whatever your favorite charity is. And with that promise of trying to get some sort of tax deduction in there, how real is that in terms of the impact that it makes? Because I imagine there are not a very small percentage of people where giving an amount is going to suddenly drop them down a tax bracket and therefore, result in a saving and a positive impact on things. It seems like something more that should be better planned rather than, falling into that cycle of, okay, it's the end of financial year now, we should give.
100%. Donations is a really good one. This is just going to be a personal belief of mine, but my philosophy for me is that my charitable giving is based on things that are important to me. And those things are important to me over an ongoing period, not just getting a tax deduction at the end of the financial year. So for me, it's about choosing causes that are meaningful to me. And I think once you find those meaningful causes, it then becomes more of an ongoing giving it to be more beneficial to the cause you're giving to, rather than just donating at the end of the year and getting a tax deduction. Again, just for me, there's a much deeper philosophy behind giving that goes beyond the tax deduction.
This podcast is brought to you by bucketlistakcounting.com.au. Speak to David Patterson and his team if you want to take better control of your life and business, helping small business owners like you be successful designing the life of your dreams. Go to bucketlistakcounting.com.au or check out the show notes for more information. Now back to the program. Yeah, I think that's something we might explore in a future episode a little bit more, but I want to talk about some of these other items that people tend to look at the end of a financial year. And a lot of it might be investing in capital equipment, cars and the like, or various equipment that they might need in the office and computers and those sorts of things, upgrades and stuff. Again, that jumping at it at the end of the financial year, you shouldn't be looking at that as just kind of, oh, this is the reward at the end of the financial year. It should be that you know that this is coming up, and the opportunity to do that may not be May, June. It could and should have been earlier.
100%. And the equipment's a very good example. And I think what's happened in the past too, when we had the immediate tax write-off for equipment, it suddenly became a spend because of the tax deductibility of the whole piece of equipment. Now, you could be dealing with clients that are buying $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 pieces of equipment that get an immediate tax deduction. Where the piece of equipment they're replacing needed to be replaced or not, the impact of being able to claim 100% tax deduction was too great an attraction to not take advantage of, which is fair enough. I think what starts to happen now, given that they've scaled the deductibility of capital equipment right back, is that, again, businesses should now be starting to focus on a rolling process of, what equipment do we have, having an audit of your equipment and working out when these things should be replaced to maximize the impact that it's going to have on your business.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important thing, isn't it? There's the practicality of whether you need it, when you need it. And sometimes I get it that you can look at it and say, well, really, we probably could get another 6 to 8 months worth of life out of something, but the opportunity is now to capitalize on that. So sometimes that can be the decision, right? But a lot of the time it is, don't just jump because there's big flashing lights saying buy now.
No, 100%. It should fit into your overall business cycle. And I think, you look at a lot of these car yards and, everyone who's doing end of financial year sales, they're not doing it to help you reduce tax per se. They're doing it to try and get sales. And they're using the 30th of June as an opportunity to increase the amount of sales that they get. So it definitely still has to fit in with your overall business philosophy over a longer period of time.
So let me ask you this, David. Who takes responsibility for the planning to get ahead so there isn't this crazy rush at the end of financial year? Is it business that needs to take more of an active role in that, and even individuals, because there's also a rush on individuals as much as there is on business? Or do you think that accountants need to be more proactive in getting ahead with this sort of thing?
I think it's definitely a combination of both, Anthony. I think there's a need for proactivity from an accountant's perspective, if for nothing else than to spread out the load of that end of financial year rush. But I think there also needs to be a bit of ownership from the business owner as well to take a sort of a bigger picture approach of how their business is performing and to build these things in, over the whole year, not just towards the end of the year. So, again, it's a matter of having the planning in place and maybe meeting with your accountant quarterly to review how your business is performing and make changes as you go along rather than leave it all to the end of the year and make all the decisions in a 6-week period.
And I imagine part of the chaos that happens is the requirement to get all sorts of information from businesses or individuals so that you can complete all of that tax information. So planning ahead with a lot of that stuff is also important, right? Some things have to wait until then because you'll get a statement from, for example, your health provider will give you that statement at the end of the financial year. So you can't necessarily have it, 3 or 4 months before, but they're the little things. There's lots of other things along the way that you can be ready for so that it's well and truly planned and it's just dotting I's and crossing T's when you get to that point.
That's 100%. The end of financial year element should just be almost a cross-references to the work that you've put in for the whole financial year to make sure that you've done everything that you said you were going to do and that you've sort of ticked everything off so that it's more of like I said, a cross-check rather than a whole body of work that gets done in that last 6 weeks.
I've just come up with an idea for you, David. We talk about bucket lists all the time. It is the Bucket List Accountant podcast. I think we need a bucket list for businesses to avoid the end of financial year pain that happens with that mad rush. We need a checklist of things that people can be doing and should be doing throughout the year so that they can tick that all off. And at the end is avoid the mad rush of the end of the financial year. And I think anyone listening in that's just experienced that rush, that's something that they need.
Absolutely. And perfect, Anthony. As soon as we get off this recording, I'll knuckle down and I'll pump something out that does that very thing.
There you go. I've just delivered for everyone a promise that by the time you're listening to this, there'll be something in the show notes that you'll be able to click on, so you'll be able to get access to that list that David will put together. Because that end of financial year thing, it just baffles me that I speak to so many accountants where it is just a mad rush. Don't speak to me May, June, and into July. It is just crazy times. Yeah. And it shouldn't be that way for everyone. It's an opportunity for everyone to get in advance and change the nature of the relationship that you have with your accountant for the positive, not just because you want to avoid an end of financial year rush, but because of all the positives that can come from planning and knowing where there are opportunities to capitalize on. Because there's also, we go back to the capital idea as well, is that there's nothing worse than being told, yes, you can actually afford and you should buy this because there are some gains for you in the business by doing it now, but basically you've got 2 weeks to do it. And that's less than ideal, to say the least.
Oh, 100% it is. And there is a benefit, and I think it's a good opportunity for probably business owners to experience their accountant in ways that they probably haven't done before by engaging and talking and doing a lot more planning a lot earlier than what has been done. And I think end of financial year rush, it's effectively just a habit that's been created over years and years and years of business and being an accountant. It's kind of like an expectation that you get into that last 6 or 7 weeks and it's an all-out rush, and that's just what you do. I think if we can buck that trend and make it more of a year plan rather than a 6 or 7 week plan, I think it's going to benefit the business owner in ways that they probably don't really understand at the minute. And it'll also benefit the accountants because, like you said at the end, their decisions can be made without a 2-week rush time frame to implement. It can be done over, some research can be done, a whole range of other things can be done to make sure it's the right decision that's being made and not just a decision that's being made because there's 2 weeks to go before the 30th of June.
And I think it's important as well, just to wrap things up, that it can be incredibly rewarding to get the information well in advance. It could be halfway through the year that you're on track, that next month you'll be able to buy this and it will have an advantage for you by doing this, or that, it could be the opposite. Don't do this because it will have a negative impact on you. Like having that relationship, but being pre-planned, should be looked at as a rewarding experience. That in itself should be part of the bucket list.
100%. And I think one of the big things that does as well is it puts you a lot more in control of your business and a lot more in control of your cash flow and when you need to spend money for your business rather than sort of all in that last 6 or 7 week period.
Fantastic. Well, I think as we wrap this up, we'll just remind everyone now that there's going to be a little bucket list on how to avoid the end of financial year crisis that's going to be available to everyone to access in the show notes. David, thanks for being part of this little episode, because I think we're trying to save your bacon a little bit by not having May, June being as crazy as it has been for future years.
Thanks, Anthony. Yes, and I'm looking forward to a much more relaxed and streamlined May, June next year.
The Bucket List Accountant podcast is brought to you by David Patterson and his team at Bucket List Accountant. Go and visit their website for more information, details of course in the show notes. I'm Anthony Perl, your host from Podcast Done For You. We look forward to having your company in the next episode.